Hi and welcome to this latest Brixton Housing Co-op how-to, which is about how to resolve disputes amicably. And I mean, it's quite a topic, isn't it? Because where there's human beings, there is room for there to be dispute. And we can have disputes that relate to people, human beings, people, personalities, we're different, passion, families, one-to-one relationships, wherever we congregate. There can be disputes that relate to property and possessions. From pretty much anything that we own, there can be those kind of disputes. Power, position, privilege. So whether we're collectivists, that thing about jockeying for power, it could be anywhere in the workplace, it could be in a committee, it could be here, it could be there. There's those dynamics. We see it in the world scene, we see it in the playground, we see it in the boardroom, we see it everywhere. And of course, in particular individual projects that we might be working on and throughout our professional life. And very often it's a blend of all of those things. So that really is the scene setter for today, that there are just disputes that will emerge in life. And maybe by way of setting the scene again, the one thing for us to be aware of is just that life is full of change, uncertainty, and all sorts of issues that will mean that the chances of there being disputes, challenges, conflict are high. So there's all sorts of issues in life that we're concerned about. And there may well be all sorts of, we might feel, actually what we can see here is, isn't it? There may be many, many, many things that we feel that we're concerned about, but we might feel as though there's far less that we can influence. So what this is about is actually, well, what is your sphere of influence and how we can begin to shape those things that we're concerned about. But life is full of change and uncertainty. As they say, there's no guarantees in life. They say that there's just death and taxes. And there might even be a few people who never pay any taxes. Let's take, again, as we begin to step into this topic, looking at this thing, the human condition. Many of you will have come across Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is really useful to be aware of, that for us as human beings, that at the base, there's our physiological needs: food, water, warmth, and rest. And so there will be conflicts. If those things aren't there, there'll be panic and so on. So this is recorded during the time of COVID-19. So it's a time where even in lots of places where people might be very, very fortunate that generally economically in that particular place things were settled, all of a sudden these things can suddenly emerge. So that this is the baseline: the physiological needs and our safety needs, a home, hopefully to live in, and so on. Then it comes up to the next level is kind of more physiological needs, wanting to belong, intimate friendships, family friendships, needing to feel some sense of prestige that we've achieved something. That might be just achieving something in the playground, at work, or in our own lives. And then higher than that is the sense of self-fulfillment, self-actualization, that who am I kind of question. So it's just useful to be aware that these are part of the dynamics. And a quote of mine that I wanted to throw in here is that communication is the breath or death of any relationship. So we have all these relationships, and communication, and whether we have it, the nature of it, the quality of it, the regularity of it, the consistency of it, is part of the breadth or death of the success of any of those relationships. And I think a lot of this will come into context as we journey throughout this session. So this is a slide that I've shared in some of the other how-to workshops, but which is really important. So what we've essentially got in life is human beings, human interactions. And so for us to begin to understand how is it we understand, motivate, and influence people, and hopefully avoid conflicts and resolve disputes, we need to understand a number of things. We've got different personalities. We see it from very early on. Anyone who's got siblings, or anyone who's got nieces and nephews, or from when we first engage with people from very early age, we see that the different personalities. And it's interesting that often the personality, parents and often will say that the personalities there emerges very, very early on. We've got different personalities. We've got different priorities, different things that are really important for us, so that when we show up at the co-op meeting or when we show up there at work, different people have got different priorities personally and professionally. So we can already begin to see that there can be already some disputes, some room for disputes here. We've got different desires, fears, and drivers. So I think there's something on a very human level about what are the fears and desires, the desires and the drivers that are there, that are going on for us. That may well be based on a number of other things here. We've got different values and beliefs that we are conditioned with, that we pick up as we grow. Therefore, there's different conditioning that we picked up, different culture, different concerns, different constraints. We look at different people here around this table, they're going to be very different backgrounds, different circumstances, and so on. We've also got different insight, different information, different inspiration, different opinions. So there's all of this different stuff that as we grow, that we gather, that's different. Timing can be a factor, our tenacity, language. There are just so many different things here. We have different abilities and disabilities, which is important for us to be aware of. That will affect. So once any two of us are coming into contact with each other, we've got to be aware that we have different abilities, different strengths, different physiological, different mental, in so many different ways, abilities, disabilities. We have different learning styles, different ways in which we like to learn, which is really interesting to be aware of. Here, some people may well be more visual, some people are more, so they like seeing things and visual representation like these slides. Other people are very much more auditory, they like discussing things, talking things through. Some people are far more kinesthetic, doing, feeling and making things. So if I'm presenting in a way that if I'm very auditory and there's no visual for somebody who's visual, that may well be very difficult for them to learn. There might be conflicts that can appear there. And we have different resources and different support. And we are different, we are diverse. In so many ways, gender, race, faith, age, sexuality, belief system, and so on. So that's important for us to be aware of as a backdrop to all of this stuff. So one thing for us to bear in mind is that when disputes emerge, be it at home, in the family, in the workplace, and so on, that there's different perspectives, because very often I'm locked in my own world. Why has that happened? Why is that project being dumped on me? I don't think that that's the way to do it. So I've got to be aware that there's my perspective on things. There's the other person who I'm perhaps seeing things differently, the other person in the committee, my boss, a colleague. So it's my perspective. There's the other person's perspective that I might be in dispute with. There may well be all sorts of other people in the team or in the family in the co-op, their perspective. And then there's an interesting thing, which is interesting to explore in itself. There's the facts, isn't there? There's facts. I mean, that's interesting in itself. And then there's the emotions. What I've done here with this slide, and it might well be something that if we were doing this here in person, or if you're doing it at home, you might even want to take a photograph of. And what you could do is to take an issue that you're kind of wrestling with, and it might be gently wrestling with or what have you, and just fill in each box. Think about the topic, write the topic at the top. What's my perspective on it? What's the other person's perspective on it? Trying to be as impartial as you can. What are the facts only? Okay, the facts is there has been this project. We've been told by our boss that it needs to be completed by the end of January. The facts are we've only got 2 months remaining on it. We've got only this amount of budget toward it, etc. The facts only. And then what you could place on the other side is the emotions only. So yes, what you would do with this exercise is to take a photograph that will draw out again, take an issue that you're wanting to work through, and with perspective and right, what's your perspective on it? What's the other person's perspective on it? Try and be as impartial as you can. What are the facts only, the actual technical facts? Project that's been given to us, it's got to be done by the end of December. The budget for it is this amount of money. The three of us that are due to be working on it. And then over here, you could put the emotions only. I've kind of done a heart broken into half. You could put your emotions and what seem to be the other person's emotions. Sometimes when we do this, it just helps us to widen the perspective. In the same way, if I kind of step back here from my camera, I'm seeing a little bit more. this is just helping me widen that perspective. That might be something that to kind of come back to and to be aware of. So what we're doing here is just raising our perspective before we zoom in. Often when challenges emerge, we get so locked into it that perspective is the thing that we just don't have. So that will be something perhaps for us to return to and to talk about. So what really happens when there's a dispute or when there's an issue, when anything happens? This slide, which I think is really, really useful, is about how we take in information. So what we've got here is that there's an external event, and then the filters in our head do a number of things. We generalize because we need to kind of categorize things that we recognize. Okay, that's a cat, that's a dog, that's sky, that's a tree, you know, so we're generalizing things. We're deleting things we can't make sense of. Now, this is so interesting. Take, for example, we're at a meeting, and it might be a co-op meeting, it might be a work meeting. There's all sorts of information. We're reading reports, there's this and there's that. And we delete things. Our mind kind of is deleting the things, the charts, the bits of the text that we can't quite make sense of. We do that all the time. We do that all the time in everything, because if you think about it, as we walk down the street, there's all of these, they're saying there's millions of bits of data and all of this kind of stuff. And so the mind is generalizing certain things and it's deleting certain things in order that we're able to be focused, that we're not so overwhelmed. Good example of this is perhaps when you go into a supermarket. Take, for example, I want you to imagine for a moment yourself walking to a supermarket that you do know. And in your mind's eye, go around that supermarket. And now I want you to think about the time that you went into a supermarket that you don't know, that you've not been in before, or whether the supermarket suddenly changed things around. My point here is that with the supermarket we do know, even though there's loads and loads of stuff, hundreds and hundreds of products, we kind of broadly, it's easier for us because our mind is kind of generalized, deleted, and blah, blah, blah. But when we go into the supermarket, we don't know. There's suddenly, whoa, there's all of these aisles and all of this kind of stuff. Or when the supermarket's just I don't know if you can remember a time when that supermarket you do know has shifted things around. Suddenly your mind is having to work these things out. So we delete things we can't make sense of. And we then have got this our own way over time of how we process things. And we've got these different values, these different beliefs, these different memories, and past decisions that we've made. And all of that is creating this our own internalized representation of the event that we actually see. So two people see an event on the street, two people having an argument, and their take on it might be completely different based on our backgrounds and our state, and that affects our physiology, how we feel about the end, and our behavior. So an event which might seem to some people, somebody talking about a particular topic, about a budget in a meeting that might to many people seem absolutely fine and just matter of fact, for somebody else might set off all sorts of things because of budget matter in the past, etc. This is so important for us to be aware of in terms of how we engage with things. I just think this is such a useful slide for us to be aware of as we set the scene, for today. And again, if there's any of these slides we need to photograph, then do. We'll come back after we've recorded this. So let's talk about, like all things, they say that prevention is better than cure. So we want to hopefully deal with disputes amicably, or hopefully even get to a point where it doesn't even come to the point of it being a dispute. So I've just put down here just 12 tips that will just kind of help us, first and foremost, building rich relationships and avoiding negative ones. Think about whether we know this from our schooling and so on. When we first go to school, you know, we try and build the thing in relationship, stay away from people who seem to be into troublemakers and so on. Sometimes we forget this stuff in our adult lives. Build the rich relationships. Being polite, professional, and personable at all times, even when others aren't necessarily being the same, because that will still have an impact on us. I'm a big fan of point number 3 here. which seems simple, but many of us can get drawn into this. Avoid arguments, gossip, trouble and conflict. Avoid it. Avoid the arguments, gossip and trouble. And, you know, when you realize again, like it's actually, I don't need to go there, don't need to get involved in this one. Avoid it. Point 4, spot life's drains and radiators. What we mean by that, who are the people who are energizing to you? The people in your life who just fill you with joy and that they're just a pleasure to be around. They're nourishing. Spend more time with those people. Be aware of the people who are drains, the more difficult. You're not going to be able to avoid them completely. You might work with them. One of them might well be a boss, a colleague, or what have you. But it's about being just aware. Linked to this, choosing your company and your counsel wisely is a kind of summary of many of these things. And do set clear boundaries in life, work, and relationships and so on. What is acceptable to you? What's not acceptable? How much, what's your threshold for certain things? This might be one for you to sit with after this session and to really think about, do you have those boundaries? Think about those people who you know are quite good with that and they have those boundaries. A lot of this may depend on our own backgrounds, our own circumstances, how aware we are or how good we are at setting these kind of boundaries. And again, surrounding ourselves with people who are supportive of us can be useful in us setting our own. Take care of our own emotional, physical and spiritual well-being is so important, because it starts off with that, your own self-care. Again, we're recording this at a time of COVID-19. So for example, so for many people, they may already feel that they're depleted before they're even able to engage with something. It might be a time where you've been going for a stressful time or you've had a period of ill health or what have you. Really be aware of your own emotional, physical and spiritual well-being. For me, sleep, rest, taking good care is really important, because otherwise our own perception of things can be skewed by how it is that we're feeling on that particular day. It's a little bit like, you know, if you've tried to get something done and you're on an empty stomach and you're kind of, you know, that's a really simple everyday example of it, but when we're distracted and so on. Be aware of jumping to, that should be a clue, arrangements, agreements or arguments, actually that should say. Just beware of this. I think there's an old Chinese proverb which says, you know, beware doing anything in haste or from overexcitement. Just be aware of that. Generally, read agreements, do your research before signing and do all of that stuff about issues that you're involved in, particularly where the stakes are high. And be careful, calm and considered, and, you know, work within policies and procedures of things. I'm sure there's more of this stuff will emerge as we zoom a little bit deeper into this session. So there's something here about in life. This slide is really helping us to be kind of aware, hopefully before even disputes or issues emerge. What we're wanting to do is to be aware and to anticipate, okay, there might well be disputes when I'm in the workplace between colleagues, because we've got different views on things. So when we're aware, we can perhaps anticipate that there might be, okay, whenever the family gets together, emotions tend to be high. So we can anticipate that there might be those kind of challenges. So try and be aware. Again, that's this perspective thing, aware that actually I often find this scenario difficult, these kind of meetings challenging, and so on. Be aware, try and anticipate. It's a little bit like sometimes with our own well-being, sometimes we can even sense we've got a little sniffle coming on of a cold, and we might be able to ward it off by getting that rest, drinking the fluids, etc. Know what and when to accept, know what things to accept. Again, this is the boundaries point again to think about. What are the things that you are prepared to accept, how people might speak to you, what kind of behaviors, how much workload. We're all going to be different on that, being aware of that. And know when and so on to act. I'm not going to go into this too much detail, but the point here is that this then helps us think of, okay, when an event happens, what do I need to be aware and alert of? Is it something I need to be aware and alert of? Is it something I need to act on? Okay. Or is it something I just need to accept or to acknowledge? So with any event, think about where you are in your life. There might be something that you're kind of concerned about. where does it sit? Is it something you need to be aware of? Okay, this particular piece of work might be coming along to our committee in a while. This piece of project might be coming along. Okay, it's something that I might need to be aware of. Is the scenario something that's near and present where you need to act on? There isn't any food in the cupboard, so you are going to need to go out shopping, or the garden fence has now fallen down, or it's at risk of falling down, so it's something that requires that you act on. Is it something perhaps that we need to accept and acknowledge? Sometimes there will be certain factors about just how other people are. Next door has got a dog, it sometimes barks. This bit within the accept and acknowledge, or what are the things that I need to let go of? I need to let go of the fact that I'm always trying to change my sister or my boss or whatever. Is that something I need to let go of because of me? What are the things that I need to let others? Maybe I'm getting too overly caught up in blah, 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 which isn't really my concern. Maybe I now need to let others. Are there certain things that I need to just kind of watch because they're coming down the road? And what are the things that I need to note and park? This is just a good way for us to begin to kind of compartmentalize and begin to manage some of the things that may well be going on. Sometimes we need to be aware of what our goals, what our expectations, and what's that context. You might have questions after this, and we can pick up on that. But this is just a slide to kind of help us begin to look at and address certain things. So we need to, all of this stuff really begins with us. We've got a saying in coaching and so on, that we can control, to a degree at least, we can control ourselves, our own behavior, our own how we engage with the world. We can't always control others. So the starting point is myself. And this is all about managing my own state. So this prompts us to think about, and some of you have been on some of the other webinars and so on, and some of the other workshops on that have sat with this. What you like when you're at your best? Okay, I'm at my best when I'm relaxed, when I've had a good amount of sleep, when I've done this, when when I'm working, getting on well with people, when I've had a meal, whatever. What do you like when you're stressed? Oh, well, when I'm stressed, I'm quite short. I can be a little bit rude with people sometimes. I tend to retreat. This is really useful information for you to be aware of yourself. What you like when you're put to the test or when you're faced with challenges. So given all of that, what is that you need to be mindful of? So again, this might be a slide you might want to sit with, you might want to pause if you're at home, you might want to pause there and just to work through these questions and to jot those notes down or to return to it after you've watched the whole thing through. And based on that, what actions might you need to take? You might think, you know what, when I'm at my best, yeah, I take a lot of time out, I take breaks, I do a little bit of exercise before I start working. When I'm stressed, this tends to happen. So what I need to do is make sure that I give myself a little bit of time. I don't speak out in work meetings unless I've done my research. You get the idea. This will give you some tips. And it prompts you, what are your buttons, what are your triggers? So if you know that certain people press your buttons and pull triggers, that might help you to, maybe zip up or blah, 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 prepare, take yourself out of those situations. So what are your buttons and triggers generally, and what are your triggers and buttons at work or in the co-op and so on? This can be so useful. So this is, again, just really a recap on that. Thinking about, okay, how do I respond when I'm under pressure? You could take this to if there's a particular person that you struggle with, how do you respond when you're under pressure? How do they tend to respond? And again, what things do we need to be mindful of? This slide here is about different behaviors that we tend to adopt when in various scenarios. These are in very broad terms, of course. Very, very, very broad terms. Sometimes certain issues or scenarios happen and I'm quite passive about it. I just let the argument go on or the discussions go on, and at the co-op or at work, I'm just more relaxed. I don't tend to get involved. I'm more passive about it. When certain scenarios emerge, I tend to be submissive. Okay, you're right. Yeah, I probably made a mistake. Maybe you're more assertive. Well, actually, this is how I feel about this thing. I've noticed this, I've noticed that, this is what I think, and so on. Or maybe I'm more aggressive. Well, I think that's completely wrong. That's not right. Why is it always happening to me? Why is this always happening? That aggressive. Or it might well be altered states. There may well be medically, all sorts of different reasons. Substance, there may be other reasons where we have different states. This is just useful for us to be aware of about ourselves and others. And so what you've got in very, very broad terms, the assertive, let's come back to this. Well, actually, let's start with the assertive. I'll be honest with you, the word assertive, I'm not sure, I think there may even be a better word than assertive, but this idea here is that it's I win, you win. I care about myself, I care about you. That's fine as long as we're asserting both people. I would maybe even the word affirming might be even more powerful here, I would offer you, than assertive. I think assertive needs to include the bit of affirming. There's the aggressive approach. Well, I'm going to have that. Well, you were wrong. I was right with that. I'm going to have more of the cake. Well, that means that I care about myself. I don't really care about you. That means I win and you lose. So think about those scenarios that we've had, and we've probably experienced all of these in our work at home in different scenarios. Then there's the passive aggressive. Well, I don't care about myself and I don't care about you. Well, yeah, maybe that's, that passive aggressive. I don't really care about myself and I don't really care about you. I lose, you lose, kind of thing. Maybe we should all just go away and not worry. And then there's a passive. I care about you, but I don't care about myself. This is just really useful for us to be aware of these different kind of behaviors that can happen in life. The more we're aware, the more we're able to take responsibility and support ourselves and others. So, as we pause for a moment, we all know how not to deal with we've all experienced really bad how to deal with things really, really badly, don't we? This shouting at people, making ourselves feel better than other people, talking at people. It's not effective. It's counterintuitive. It's not helpful. I'm going to pause this right now just to give you all a moment to pause and to breathe. So I've paused the recording because I'm mindful also for yourselves that you've taken on board a lot. So I've just paused the recording there. Maybe just to give us a moment to pause or breathe, or if anyone would like a cup of tea, or if there's anything, is there anything, maybe before I give us 5 minutes to catch our breath, is there anything that anyone's just wanting to ask, or can we park it until we open up more broadly?
Rashid, do you mind if I just in this moment of pause,
yeah,
if you could replace the previous slide? I just wanted to focus on that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to miss something off it. I made notes, if you don't mind, just
Please.
as we pause. The assertive, aggressive, passive, aggressive, passive.
Yeah, this is so interesting.
I think it's being passive aggressive and won't come back. Come on.
I mean, what's interesting about this, Bruce, is that many of us will probably have been all of these different things at different stages in our life, or we will have experienced it, which is sometimes there's that thing about spotting when we've been it or when we've experienced it or other people we've known is useful just to kind of, aha, yeah, that's what's going on. Angelica, anything that you're wanting to mention before we perhaps grab a very, very quick cup of tea and then we will resume? Shall we take 5 minutes just to grab a cup of tea? And then what I'll do is I'll zoom through the rest of the slides and then I'll stop recording and then we can open it up so we can really zoom through all of this stuff. Excellent. Let's take 5. You know, it's very interesting with these things. I'm just reflecting, Bruce, and thinking so much of so many things is just the awareness, isn't it? It's that kind of thing of just being aware, oh, yeah, that's what's going on. You know, almost being able to just kind of spot something before, you know, just spot, aha, that's, okay, that's me getting angry. Oh, that's me being frustrated. Oh, that's them just being blah, blah, blah. So much of this stuff is just, is good awareness, good self-awareness. It's what jumps out to me.
My partner writes about science, and occasionally I'll read some of the things he writes. And he was putting forward an idea that through the development of science, there was a phase where science was an assembly of lists. What happened was an observation in nature, and people would draw together what they observed, and so there'd be lists upon lists upon lists. But then there was another approach, sometimes running alongside it or at different phases, where what mattered was the underlying principles on which you could understand everything. And it's very interesting. I mean, what I really like is when you quite clearly articulate difference and actually put difference out there. I mean, in one way it's overwhelming because you say, here are the differences, and you list them all. And it's like, ah! So, but if you think about it as a principle, that actually difference isn't something we tack on. Difference is fundamental to our experience. And it's very sobering, but I think it's also very, I think it's very human.
Yeah.
I think it's very, it feels a very positive foundation.
I agree. I think that would be really good for us to pick up on once we've finished the recording and we can then unpack. So brilliant stuff. So I'm going to resume. I think I was on the slide after it just for continuing thingy. I'm going to find the, oops, let me just re-find the slides and then I will restart recording. I haven't restarted recording yet. Let me just find this. Can you see the slides, everyone, again?
Yeah.
You can. Okay, right. Okay, let me, I just want to just check that we're still recording. Okay, I'm just going to just pause for one moment. Let me just check we are recording. I'm just going to stop the share for a moment. And so, yeah, so we've been looking at how not to do it. Let's resume. What we're really wanting to do is, over a period of time, begin to step into other people's shoes. Sometimes we're so caught up in our own perspective. It's about, as best we can, stepping into other shoes and moving from head to heart. And we'll pick up on that more as we go along. But that's really what we're wanting to do, to begin to appreciate other people's perspective as well as our own, beginning to understand a little bit of their lived experience and being a little bit more heartful. Staying calm is really, really useful here. So once we know what our state is, well, you know, what we're like at our best when we're stressed, we can begin to put things in place, know when we need to go for a walk, when we need to sleep on an idea rather than responding to that email straight away. Here's just a quote from me: step outside for a while. It's better to hug a tree than to bang your head against the wall continually. Sometimes just that pause, that breath, that stepping away from the project, from that, taking it, you know, pausing for a moment. And maybe we'll pick up on that later. I have a saying, actually, another saying: the stiller you are, the calmer life is. So the more, if I'm very wired, if I'm very anxious about everything, I'm likely to find that things like that. It's a little bit like, do you remember as a kid, the thing about when you got, they call it a roundabout, you go on a roundabout, and then when you get off, the whole world seems to be swirling around that. Well, life can be a little bit like that. The more calm I am, the more I'm able to see things perhaps as they are, and to be a little bit more calm and creating a bit less noise. So let's first of all pick up on low-level disputes. Some tips here. Give each other some time and space. So it might be just, you know, the day-to-day, you know, you've had a slight disagreement with a colleague, with a partner, with a friend, with so on. Most of us are really good at this, to be fair. Give each other space and time. Listen. Actually listening. Listen to them. talking things through, apologize, mean it and act on it, and learn from yours and others' mistakes. But it's also about knowing when to mend, and there will be times, as we all know in our own lives, when we might need to move on from that situation, from that piece of work, from that connection, from that group, from that committee, whatever it might be. So one of the things I just want to invite you to just sit with, maybe to pause recording on, what do you do? What works for you? And perhaps what could you do differently or better? So that's with the low-level disputes. So, and also what we want to try and begin to do is always seek the win-win. The win-win, not I lose, in some of those other states. Just a couple of pointers here to think in broad terms. In life, begin to spot, and in different scenarios you find yourself in, when do you need to step up? These might be the times actually you need to step up, do your bit, get involved, or there is an issue that needs to be addressed. When do you need to step down? Maybe you've been on your hobby horse too much. Maybe it's time for you even to step down. Maybe you've been leading the committee for the last 30 years and it's a chance for somebody else needs to take down. When do you need to step alongside somebody who's struggling? When do you need to step aside? Step aside and let somebody else have a go or have a say. And when might you even need to step away? So these are just some prompt questions that perhaps you could be think about different situations at home, at work, projects, committees, co-op more broadly, also any scenario in your life, and think about. Encourage moving from problem finding, which many people are good at, to solution seeking, which fewer people practice. So that's what we really want to do, and seeking that win-win. It's very powerful, empowering everybody, especially in something like a co-op where we're about helping each other. So I put together just for you, you're the first people in the world to see this, because I just put this together over the last week, this new approach. I thought I wanted to come up with a nice acronym of when we are, let's say if we are dealing with disputes amicably, what could be a way of then, let's say we have got a dispute now to address. We've done some of the things of trying to avoid, being calm, avoiding trouble, not getting involved. We've done some of the thing about managing low-level challenges and so on. But let's say there's something a little bit more substantial that needs to be addressed. So my tip here is that to use a warm approach. The warm approach is more likely to get results. So what I'm going to show you here over these slides is first of all the technique as a principle, and then I'll show you a couple of letters that are employing this particular principle. So this could be something that you could use whether you're having a conversation with somebody in person or if it was in a letter. First of all, the W is warm. We want a warm greeting and introduction. Hi there, great to see you today. The A is to acknowledge the concerns and complaints. Well, I know that you were concerned about blah, 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 blah. The R is rich, relevant response and recommendations. We're mindful that you've been concerned that the bins are always seem to be left out of your house, and that sometimes that the bikes are also. I wonder if we should come up with a system whereby that we have a rota that these days I leave my bikes outside and these days so that R bit is rich, relevant response and recommendations. The M is a mindful and measured next steps and wrap up. So given that, should we chat about it next week? If I put together the rota now and then we do blah, blah, blah. So that's basically the approach. Sometimes we might even need to make the approach warmer. So I've put an E in R. Sometimes you might need to put some evidence in. Well, I've noticed over the last 5 weeks, this and this has happened. So there's a problem. And it's only fair to expect that I will be able to get to out of my front gate. And sometimes we might need to refer and redirect. Well, I'm mindful that this is something that we might need to take to membership because there seems to be a challenge with this or redirect. So the E and the R are the tips. So let's see a letter that, for example, puts that into place. So you could use that, remember, an in-person, or it could be in a letter in an email. Let's take a look at a sample letter. So here is this first letter, which I'm going to bring to our attention, is a letter where you might be responding to a dispute issue. So thank you for your email on October the 29th about the name of the issue. So that's the W bit, the warm. The next bit, the A about the acknowledge. So sorry to hear that you feel, and you use their words, that you feel that you've been ignored, people are being rude to you, etc. So sorry that you feel, and that you also that you feel as though I've been responsible for, and again you add their words. and that you would like blah, 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 blah to happen, again, using their words. This bit is so important at acknowledging. Very often what happens, the warm bit is to make sure that people are even going to want to read your letter in the first place, for the first bit of this engagement. The second bit of knowledge is really important. Very often we jump into how we see the world. Well, you're not going to be able to persuade people if you go into that. You need to acknowledge them. I'm so sorry that you feel upset, ignored, as though we've been rude to you and so on, and that I've been responsible for this, and happen, and that you feel that you'd like X, Y, and Z to happen. So we use their words, they feel affirmed. Then we're doing the R bit, where we are the rich recommendations and all the rest of it. Regarding ABC, briefly and respectfully, you add in the facts. So you would add in the facts. This happened on this date, this happened on this date, this happened on this date. Here's the bit where the next stage in the letter, they are highlighting a way of hopefully moving the scenario moving forward. Whilst I'm unable to do E and F, due to, I can certainly do G, starting from the name of the date. And I think we could also explore H, which I think would help us to resolve the issue. So what this person is doing here, they're trying to richly address these points, and whilst I'm unable to, but they're keeping the boundaries, whilst I'm able to do this thing and this thing that you've said, I can certainly do this thing, G, and I can do that starting from this date. So they're showing willing. And they're also coming up with an alternative, because remember, they can't do E and F. So H, which I hope would resolve the issue. Please let me know how that sounds. And when you are free, giving a reasonable time frame to discuss this via blah, blah, blah. I'm also available on, so they've set out some time frames. So they've taken some responsibility. And then finally, many thanks again, and for your time and concern. I really hope we can resolve this promptly and wisely. So they've used this approach. They were warm, they acknowledged the complaints and concerns. There was rich, relevant response and recommendations, and they were mindful. So that's how they've used that particular letter. So again, if you're at home and you're watching this, feel free to photograph this or just pause the video so that you've got that. And that would probably work in many, many, many scenarios for many letters. And you could even have conversations that are like this. Let's see one other letter. So this is the one where you were responding to where somebody else has basically raised a dispute. The second example is where it's the other way around, if you see what I mean. So here's where you yourself are seeking a resolution to a dispute that's happened. So, dear name of person, I hope you're very well. Depending on the scenario, you could make that even warmer by adding a little bit more thingy. I'm just writing you as I'm quite concerned about ABC. Forgive my spelling, by the way, a note here, check your spelling, especially if the person you're dealing with is a stickler for spelling. I'm just writing to you, so I'm quite concerned about ABC, which has happened, adding the dates and the details, which is having E, F, and G effects. And they've also done the warmer approach where they put the evidence. I attach a letter, photograph, and receipt. So what they've done here is that they have been warm to begin, then they are affirming a particular scenario. This is what's happened. They've been specific about the dates and they've attached evidence. Please, could we, and then what this part of the letter gives us a number of options. Could we either meet to discuss this, and then we'd add the time frame as apt, or please could we do H, I, and J, which is their suggestions. Please could we move the bikes, set up a rota, do blah, 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 blah. Or please could we pass this on to, or raise this at this committee, or discuss it with our boss. So those, depending on the scenario, might be the options that you might have, or it might sometimes be a blend. Please confirm receipt of this letter email and let me know which of the times of these times would suit you. Blah, 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 time frame. And hopefully this should avoid X, Y, and Z. What this person's done here is that if, depending on the nature of how serious the situation is, they are very subtly saying that this letter does need to be addressed, because hopefully us being able to address this will avoid us needing to take it to blah, blah, blah committee, to the membership committee, the management committee, to the head of HR, to any legal, blah, blah, blah. This has got to be done with care and with mindfulness, but it can be very, very useful to let the other person know that this isn't just a thingy letter, it's a letter that they're going to need to take seriously. I really appreciate your time and attention on this. Many thanks in the name. We'll come on to the fact that letters, of course, the challenge with them is that they do not, you may not be able to tell people's tone and emotion. Really briefly, I'm going to share a few quick things to think about and a few tools which I will then leave you to sit with and think about. And maybe it might even be that you might want to attend one of these sessions again when we run them again in the new year, to be able to ask questions about or something. Here are just some real basic communications essentials that come up in a number of our workshops. This is really important. So first of all, think about what is your goal with whatever the complaint, the concern is. What is the outcome that you're wanting to achieve? This is key. The outcome is that you want the gate fixed. The outcome is that you want them, you want for you both to meet, to agree a rota for clearing up the communal hallway. Think about what's the outcome that you're wanting. So what's the goal? Then who's the audience? Because depending who they are, their age, their background, all the things we've talked about today, is going to shape how we do it, how we word it, the best approach, whether a letter, a meeting and so on, because they will have different abilities, styles, needs, concerns. Who's the audience? What's the best timing to do this? This is so important. Is it really best that you bang on their door first thing on a Monday morning when you know they're rushing out to work? Or is it that you gently tap on their door on a Sunday when you know they've gone for a nice relaxing walk? Timing. And then we're thinking about what's the message you're delivering here? What's the best medium to deliver it? Is it a typed letter in bold, or is it a warm conversation, a chat? Who's the best messenger? Is it you? Or is it me? Is it you? Or is it somebody else? Am I going to really wind them up? Is it better that we get somebody else who might do that? So this really helps us. And the playful example I often give of this is, imagine we're all students and we all share a flat. And once again, you get home and yet again, the washing up's not been done, right? So you get home and yet again, the washing up's not been done. It's getting really annoying. There's been food left and you've been worried about rodents and this and that and so on, or what have you. You get home, yet again, it's not been done. The thing is, what is the typical message that most people come in and that they will give? Very often people say to me at workshops and sessions, they say, oh, why hasn't that been done again? Not me again, or it's always me who has to do that. That's the message that's being delivered, or even worse, with expletives. But I then ask, what is the goal and the outcome you're trying to achieve? Well, the goal and the outcome that you're wanting to achieve is for the washing up to be done and for the rota to be adhered to. So was the message that you delivered the most effective way to deliver the message? No, it wasn't, because you've got people's backs up. Why hasn't it been done again? Oh, not me again. So the message that may have been better in that scenario, once we thought about what's the best medium, well, maybe the best medium is a household meeting when everyone's watched a film on a Sunday afternoon and they're relaxed, or on a Saturday evening. Maybe the best messenger is Sharon, because everybody likes her and respects her, and she's got a nice way of saying things to people rather than me, who always has a way of upsetting people. And what's the message? This message is, hi everyone, great that you've enjoyed today's film and so on. Just a quick reminder, remember that we've got the washing up rota. I've just noticed that, Mark, you were due to do it this week, and for the last couple of weeks it's not been done. Mark, are you going to be able to do that this week? And can we all agree that we're going to follow the rota? Can we have a quick show of hands? Blah, 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 blah. That's far more effective. So what this is to get you to pause and think about before any scenario. What's your goal? Who's the audience? What's the best timing? Who's the messenger? What's the medium? And so on. And what is the message? But it should always be clear, considered, concise yet comprehensive, calm. You need to be consistent and customer friendly, person friendly, and compelling enough to make somebody want to act on it. Which is why in that previous letter, the person said, well, hopefully this will do this, which will help us avoid doing X, Y, and Z, because you need to be compelling. So I just want to, and again, you might want to pause this, come back to it, or what have you. This is a beautiful tool. It's one of the tools that comes up most often when I'm coaching, training people and so on. It's a very, very, very powerful tool to get you to think very carefully about things rather than just rushing in there. I'm just going to share a few very final wrap-up tools before I close this up, and then I'm going to stop the recording, and then those of us who are here, we're going to have a nice conversation about it, or if you're at home, perhaps you can reflect on it. The communication, again, is the breath or death of every relationship. Listening is important. The right language and words. Our tone is so important. Our body language is so important. Asking, reflecting back to people where you said X, Y, and Z. That's why even in those letters, that reflecting back, you were concerned about X, Y, and Z. Avoiding prejudice and, really being aware of these things. So sit with this slide, consider how you are with these things, just being mindful about listening, the language that we choose, the tone, our body language. Service with a smile is always better than service with a snarl, I find. So I want you to sit with this, and after this, we're going to have a conversation about this here in the room. What might we need to be mindful about when we're having conversations with people in person? We might need to be aware perhaps of things like space and body language and so on, people's age or their gender. There might be all sorts of things there in terms of in person that might be a factor depending on who we're dealing with. What do we need to be aware of online? By email, okay, maybe we can't tell people's humor or what have you, or this. What things do you need to be aware of? What things do you need to be aware of on the phone? Maybe they can't see you, they can't see those gestures, and in a letter. Well, also, some of the things, any of the written forms, bear in mind that they're a record and lots of other people can see them, not just you. So I just want you to sit with that. We need to be very mindful and considered all the times. All of these different forms of communication will have a different impact. And there'll be times when you'll need to choose a different one, because for the formalized ones, like for example, those letters that we shared before, if you think about it, they were notable concerns now, so that they realized that they needed to put it in writing. So I just want you to sit with and think about what the things you need to be mindful of. So choose the medium. That's really getting us to think about the medium, choosing the right medium at the right time. And sometimes it'll be a blend of different mediums, depending on the seriousness. Just going to leave you with a couple of final slides. The feedback sandwich is, or really the conversation sandwich, starting off with something very warm. Hi, blah, 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 blah. Jack, pleasure to see you. Then the middle bit, the constructive feedback. I just noticed that 3 things that we didn't manage to do last time. We didn't do X, Y, and Z. And please can we do blah, blah, blah. And ending with the positive feedback. But overall, thank you so much for, because otherwise the idea here is that things get very messy. Conversations get messy without the top and the tail of that. There's a tip here around dealing with difficult news. We run a different session on dealing with difficult people and events and circumstances, so I'm not going to go into that into detail. And there is also a tool here about how we can manage expectations. Check out the other webinars and for those. I'm not going to go into them into detail right now. There's a slide here which you can photograph and consider that talks you through how to deal with challenging conversations. This just gives you some tips about how to do that. And again, our communications, our other workshops around communications and dealing with difficult situations and events, we go through this. So come along to that or watch that, where we go into that in far more detail, and that will help you there. But this is just a tool that you can use. But I want to kind of wrap up here by adding in just a couple of things, being mindfulness. Life presents all sorts of difficult scenarios. So us being aware, just being present, pausing to breathe, accepting that we can't change everybody else. There are many things that we can't change. Acceptance that sometimes it's a long spring or it's a cold winter, or this person sometimes does rub me up the wrong way. That's just their personal, how they are. Quiet mind, stillness, observing, gratitude, allowing, flowing, but being centered, and loving kindness, wishing people well, will have a huge impact on your own vibration, how you show up. And we run another session on mindfulness and compassion. And there's this slide. There will be times where you're not able to deal with things amicably and you will need help and support and advice. Here are just some useful resources. Citizens Advice Bureaus can be very useful in terms of all sorts of different types of advice on all sorts of different topics, and often just in terms of signposting. There are many different types of mediation services and I haven't gone into mediation, that mediation approach, which is about bringing people together amicably. I used to work for an organization that dealt around with, for example, family mediation instead of people going for lawyers. There's all different types of mediation. It's a very, very useful way of aiming about bringing people together can be very, very useful in all sorts of situations, in the family, in the workplace, and so on. So that could be worth looking into. Just do some searches online and you'll find all sorts of places around that. If it's workplace, you may well have unions, you might also have different staff networks and so on that might be able to help, but you can always go to ACAS, the conciliation service, and there you can see there's a web address for them. They've got all sorts of resources around mediation, dispute resolution, so don't feel as though you're alone, even if you perhaps don't belong to a union or what have you. There'll be times where it might be where you need legal advice. The Law Society's website has a list of where you can find your lawyers. I'm not familiar with what the situation now about getting legal aid and so on. It tends to vary depending what kind of political climate we're in, etc. Counselling services, you can see there's a link to a counselling directory where you can put in where you are, because there might be times where you feel that also you need that emotional support for yourself. Or you might have friends and people who you can rely on to give you that lower level, I say lower level, that more personal, interpersonal kind of support. I've just put ACAS there twice. And then finally, there's advice centres, including there's places like Brixton Advice Centre, so there. And there's a family mediation finder link there. So that's pretty much today's session. Here is a summary for us to leave you with. I'm going to pause the recording here so that in just a second, let me just check there's not another slide here. So I want you to, if you're at home, think about, is there any action you're wanting to take? Here's a summary. I'm going to leave you with this summary, and just to say, if you're watching this at home, thank you so much for being here with us. Here are some tips. Don't act in haste. You know, if you're stressed, pause, breathe, reset, group, always be courteous, do your homework, find and follow policies and procedures. That's really important, if that the co-op or elsewhere in the workplace. Be heartful rather than emotional when you're dealing with things. Be heartful rather than emotional. Put things in writing where needed. Keep clear records. This is very important if you are pursuing complaints. Respond and act promptly. Get wise advice and support guidance if you need to. So what I'm going to do, everybody, is that I am going to stop the recording now. I want to thank you if you're watching here, so that those of us who are here can have a safe, just conversation and sharing around this kind of stuff. So